The way Donald Trump is targeting his perceived political opponents after the Charlie Kirk shooting says a lot, especially compared to how little he seems to actually care about Charlie Kirk himself. Trump is doing everything possible to exploit this moment, but nothing to grieve it. And why? Because the truth is, Donald Trump doesn't care about Charlie Kirk. What really matters here is pushing back against the authoritarian power grab that is accelerating in the aftermath of this shooting. Trump sees an opportunity. That's why even Ted Cruz, of all people, had to call out the cover-up. And now, Trump is spiraling in response. But before we dive into Cruz's comments and Trump's meltdown, let me quickly ask, if you're finding value in our work, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. It really helps support the channel. Now, let's start with the spot-on reaction to the Charlie Kirk shooting and how Republicans are trying to weaponize it straight from AOC right here.
I thank the gentleman, Representative Green, for his graciousness. Today, the Republican House majority brought to the floor a resolution honoring, quote, honoring the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's assassination was a horrific and vile attack and incident of political violence. And condemning the depravity of Kirk's brutal murder is a straightforward matter, one that is especially important to help stabilize an increasingly unsafe and volatile political environment where everyday people feel more at risk. We can deeply disagree and come together as a country to denounce the horror of this killing. And it is not a license for the abuse of power and whitewashing of American history. Today's resolution only underscores the majority's recklessness by choosing to author this condemnation and honoring on a purely partisan basis, instead of uniting Congress in this tragedy with one of the many bipartisan options to condemn political violence and Kirk's murder, as we did with the late Melissa Hortman. Instead, the majority proceeded with a resolution that brings great pain to the millions of Americans who endured segregation, Jim Crow, and the legacy of bigotry today. We should be clear about who Charlie Kirk was. A man who believed that the Civil Rights Act that granted Black Americans the right to vote was a mistake, who after the violent attack on Paul Pelosi claimed that, quote, some amazing patriot, unquote, should bail out his brutal assailant, and accused Jews of controlling, quote, not just the colleges, it's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it, unquote. His rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, and sought to disenfranchise millions of Americans, far from the working, quote, working tirelessly to promote unity, unquote, asserted by the majority in this resolution.
We cannot let the right lionize Charlie Kirk to build this memorial of him on a false memory that he was some civil rights leader, that he cared about free speech. Donald Trump is showing how much Charlie Kirk cared about free speech with his attack on free speech. These people had no principles. They were operating for political gain and for profit. And that is why Donald Trump has taken Jimmy Kimmel off the air. Why he has forced ABC to essentially out and do that. Because Donald Trump knows that he has to suppress dissent, and Ted Cruz, of all people, called him out. Donald Trump didn't like it. Trump snaps at Ted Cruz's shock warning about free speech. Donald Trump has defended his Federal Communications Commission chair, Brendan Carr, after Republican Senator Ted Cruz compared him to a mafia boss for demanding Jimmy Kimmel suspension. In a stinging rebuke on his podcast this week, Cruz blasted Carr's actions, describing them as dangerous as hell and right out of Goodfellas. Let me tell you, if the government gets in the business of saying, we don't like what you, the media, have said, we're going to ban you from the airwaves if you don't say what we like. That will end up bad for conservatives, Cruz said. They will silence us. He added, warning what might happen if the Democrats returned to power and followed suit. They will use this power and they will use it ruthlessly. But speaking in the Oval Office on Friday afternoon, Trump described Carr as an incredible American patriot who had shown courage for taking on broadcast networks that criticize him. I disagree with Ted Cruz, he told reporters. I think Brendan Carr doesn't like to see the airwaves be used illegally and incorrectly and purposely horribly. He doesn't like to see a person that won the election in a landslide get 97% bad publicity before the election. The networks have to show honesty and integrity. When they take a great success, like you often do, and you make it into like it's a loser, or you put a negative spin on it, I don't think that's right. So I think Brendan Carr is a great American. The comments came days after Kimmel was fired from his show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, after making comments about the recent killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Carr, a Project 2025 architect who carried out this attack, who Trump picked to chair the FCC, then threatened to revoke ABC's broadcast license. This is a very, very serious issue right now for Disney, Carr said on the Benny Johnson podcast. House Democratic leaders called for Carr's resignation and accused him of bullying ABC into suspending Jimmy Kimmel. But while GOP members have been fairly cautious in their response, Cruz hid out at Carr's actions. He said that while Kimmel had become profoundly unfunny over the years, the push to suspend him set a dangerous free speech precedent. I never thought I'd say this, but for once, Ted Cruz actually echoed something reasonable. Let's be clear, though. It's not me agreeing with him. It's him finally landing on the same page I've been on. What's happening here is Donald Trump testing the waters, pushing to see how much further he can go. And while it didn't make big headlines, it should have. The comedian originally slated to host the White House Correspondents' Dinner, a black woman no less, was fired. She wasn't allowed to perform. That's another example of this administration's attacks on free speech, which are nothing new. From the very start, Trump demanded loyalty through things like his so-called Gulf of America vision. And companies, instead of competing based on talent or ratings, are bending to political pressure because they're more focused on mergers and corporate interests than real marketplace success. Under Trump, it's not about how good you are at your job, it's about how much you appease the state. Republicans used to accuse Democrats of wanting state-run media, but that's exactly what Trump is building. Why? Because it benefits him. Whether through expensive dinners at Mar-a-Lago, donations to his library, or spending on his crypto ventures. The reality is, Trump has made it incredibly easy to buy his favor, and in turn, he's doing plenty of political extorting. That's why these CEOs are not allies of the people. They serve their own interests, not the public's. And unless we apply real pressure, they'll continue to bow down to him just like Republican politicians do. That's why boycotting, speaking up, and making your voice heard through votes and dollars is so crucial right now. And I think Jessica Tarloff summed this up perfectly. Take a look right here.
There's been this move today to rewrite the story of how Jimmy Kimmel ended up being indefinitely suspended to absolve Brendan Carr of his role in this and the government's larger role in it. But the timeline just doesn't add up. I've heard, well, read the Hollywood Reporter and read the Wall Street Journal on this. I looked through all of it, and the common denominator is that Brendan Carr said to Benny Johnson, we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. And the affiliates, who were already freaking out about it for sure, decided then that they were going to pull it. And so ABC and Disney in general, Bob Iger, had no choice but to do it. There are some smart Republicans that are cautioning them to come back from this line. Ted Cruz, of all people, who's the chair of the Commerce Committee, which actually has oversight over the FCC, said what Carr said there is dangerous as hell. That's right out of a mafioso. When it's used to silence conservatives, we will regret it. We should denounce it. So I understand now we don't live in cancel culture. It's just consequence culture. And you think an eye for an eye is a good solution to everything. That's what I've seen pelted at me about this. Well, you did this. That is not a way to run a free society. And you can't just trample on the First Amendment because something tragic and horrible happened.
Donald Trump wants us quiet, but we won't be silenced. ABC folded to appease him instead of their audience. Proof that corporate fear, not ratings, guides many decisions today. The power actually rests with viewers. When audiences show they won't tolerate capitulation, companies will change course. Independent media, creators like Brian Tyler Cohen, The Bulwark, Midas Touch, and myself only stay strong because of you. Thank you for backing us. I'm angrier than usual, and I'll keep calling this out. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you want to support this fight, please subscribe, leave a like, and drop a blue heart if you watch to the end. Keep speaking up with me. We won't be silenced. Until next time, I'll see you soon.